Blinkist is the app that helps you become a more well-rounded person by letting you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try it for free and get 25% off a subscription by going to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. All right. So before I head out on a brief break, I do want to touch on the fact that it is August and that has some relevance. We're going to have some great guest hosts coming up. Farron Cousins will be filling in for me, Jesse Dollamore. But before I leave, it is August and supposedly Donald Trump is being reinstated in August. Yesterday, I spoke with my pillow guy, Mike Lindell, who says it'll be August, maybe September. It'll be the Supreme Court, probably, but who knows? But to step back for a second from Mike Pillow. The real question many are asking is not whether Trump will be reinstated. He won't be reinstated, but whether his followers will become violent when he doesn't get reinstated and whether his followers will try to stage a second insurrection. Now, yesterday, we looked at clips of an organization that says they're going back to the Capitol on September 18th. There are, I think we can say conservatively, millions of people, like maybe it's not tens of millions, but it's certainly millions of people, followers of Trump, who have been led to believe by any number of others that Donald Trump will be returning to the throne, as it were, somehow this month or next month. It might be through the Supreme Court. It might be through the generals of the military doing something nebulous that we don't understand. Or it'll be because something incriminating will come out and Joe Biden will resign and so will Kamala Harris, which, by the way, wouldn't make Trump president, right? I mean, Trump is not part of the line of succession right now. Or maybe they don't even know how it's going to happen, but they think maybe it will. But it won't be happening. And so then what? Among the 50 plus attendees that Salon spoke with at CPAC in Dallas, more than 40% said they believed in August Trump would be reinstated somehow. What do they do when it doesn't happen? Some law enforcement agencies are paying attention. Zachary Patrizio writes in Salon that, quote, on July 13, Bloomberg News reported that Lindell's theories are enough to put FBI Director Christopher Wray and other top national security officials on alert for the risk that the former president's most ardent supporters might again resort to violence. Now we're already seeing dates move around. What was once August 13th, now some people say will be August 21st. Why? Well, August 21st, Trump will be speaking at a rally in Cullman, Alabama. One rumor of new, I guess you could call it a new delusion, is that Trump will be reinstated at that rally. By who, how, it's not exactly clear because it will never happen. And the shifting of the date is very much like the end of the world rapture people. I've interviewed some of these people. There's always some date. It doesn't happen. So they shift the date. They say, oh, we misread the signals or God changed his mind or something was out of context. And then they come up with a new date. I don't know that it will prevent the violence, but it needs to be somehow put in these people's minds that Trump just lost. It's an Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is the one that applies. The election was certified. Joe Biden was the winner and he was sworn in. Donald Trump is not in the line of succession. If the president goes, then it goes to the VP. And if the VP goes, bye-bye, then it's the Speaker of the House and so on. Trump is not part of that. The last president is not part of that. And some others are saying now very directly, as I told you yesterday, that it will be September and they're going to the Capitol. So I think the risk for violence is real. For me, is Trump really getting reinstated is not the right question. It's a silly question. Of course he's not. The real question is, will there be violence? And I'm worried that there will be. We'll pick up on that much more in future shows, and let's hope it doesn't happen. You know, for a little while, it was mostly a radical Republican Congresswoman, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was comparing things to the Holocaust, equating things to the Nazis, raising other comparisons to World War II. It's now just becoming very widespread on the American right, and it has a lot to do with vaccines. We're going to look at a few clips. Here is David Brody, who used to be a regular panelist on Meet the Press. He was on his show. I guess he has a show now, Water Cooler on Real America's Voice. I don't know. I don't even know what that means. He is again talking about Nazis and Nuremberg codes when it comes to vaccination. Take a listen.
Violation of federal law. So why? Well, because it would violate a little thing called the Nuremberg Code.
Yeah.
A code mentioned on the FDA website, not Pizzagate.com or conspiracy.net. The Nuremberg Code emphasizes that people cannot be forced to take experimental drugs without their full consent. Now, interestingly here, the term Nuremberg Code originated in 1947 Germany during the Nuremberg trials, where, of course, Nazi doctors attempted to excuse the inhumane and deadly experiments that they conducted on concentration camp prisoners by claiming that there were no explicit rules governing medical research on human beings in Germany during that period. But you're probably thinking, well, hey, hold on, that's Nazi Germany. And Nuremberg Code or not, the U.S. government would never administer.
Yeah. So the implication is that having a requirement in order to work at certain places or go to certain schools or whatever the case may be, that's equivalent of a phase 3 trial, widely phase 3 trialed vaccine is similar to Nazi medical experimentation on Jews. Now, that sounds sort of crazy because it is. So then when he brings on his guest, Matt Staver, he sort of says, we're not literally saying that, but you kind of are, dude. Take a listen.
Well, it's interesting. You say the sirens should go off, and you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, the sirens are going off the other way. The unvaccinated in this country are being demonized. There's discriminatory stuff going on out there. I'm curious as it relates to the legal issues here regarding the Nuremberg Code. I mean, if it's under experimental use, what does that mean legally in terms of...
Now, even that, when they say it just so happens that experiment and emergency both start with the letter E. An EUA is an emergency use authorization. It's not an experimental use authorization. That's another deliberate deception.
This going up the legal food chain, what could happen here?
Well, even before you get to the Nuremberg Code, you have the emergency use authorization law. And it clearly says that you have the, quote, option to accept or refuse, close quote. That's repeated in the fact sheet required by the FDA, and it's also mentioned many times by the FDA. So that's the end of story. You have the option to refuse when it's an EUA, and it's an EUA specifically designated so by the FDA.
Now, do you guys believe that when, we're somewhere between 2 and 5 weeks from at least the Pfizer vaccine given permanent approval by the FDA, do you think that when that happens, they'll just say, oh, now we're good, now go and get vaccinated? Of course not. They're just going to come up with something else.
And federal law. In the Nuremberg Code, the very first point says that the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. There should be no duress, no deception, no pressure, and we're doing exactly the opposite. We are violating federal law. We're violating the Nuremberg Code. All of these will be brought into court to raise these issues because we are repeating, this is the tragic part of this, we're repeating the dark history of Nazi Germany, and we're not learning the lessons that the Nuremberg
we're really not, Matt.
Code and those Nazi experiments should have taught this generation.
So you're likening it to that time period. We talked about that in the monologue, and we want to be clear. I guess we have to do the disclaimer about the Holocaust and Jews. We're not talking about that.
Right. I begrudgingly have to mention we're not really talking about the Holocaust, except we are, because we're saying that a required vaccine after phase 3 trials violates the Nuremberg codes, just like the Nazis did during their medical experiments. It's crazy. This is where they're now. This is the plane where they now exist. Here's one more example. Newsmax guest Pastor Brian Gibson, says that vaccination.
Congratulations, sir!
Whoa.
You just won the election.
That was actually an accident. Newsmax guest Pastor Brian Gibson says vaccination is going to provide a framework for future genocide. Yeah.
What do you make of that, Pastor?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're playing. This comes straight out of the Marxist handbook, right? You try to set as many different groups against each other as you can in a nation to weaken it, tear it apart, and rebuild it in the image you want. At first in America, it was racial tension, black versus white. Now we're moving from vaccinated to the unvaccinated. And I'll tell you, it's scary because whenever you see guys saying, you see leaders saying, you can go to the gym if you have the vaccination. You see the president talking about the problem that is the unvaccinated. These things have played out before in history.
He's sort of alluding to saying the unvaccinated in a pejorative way is like when the Nazis started saying the Jews. That if you're not making the connection, this is the analogy he's making. And then he actually just straight up says it.
Where you take a certain group of people and demonize them.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what it is. It's a framework for animosity between two groups at best. At worst, it's a framework for a future genocide.
So there it is. Just like the Jews started to be demonized by the Nazis, the unvaccinated are starting to be demonized by the vaccinated, I guess, and by Joe Biden. That we are in real serious trouble here as a country, my friends, if these narratives become the prevailing narrative. So once we get that FDA approval, let's see how many of them go out and get vaccinated. It won't be, quote, experimental anymore, as they like to say. Let's see how many of them go out and get vaccinated at that point in time. Let me know your thoughts on Twitter. You can find me at dpacman. And remember that we are now just about 10 days away from the David Pakman Show 16th anniversary. On that day, August 16th, you can get an insanely discounted David Pakman Show membership. I would love for you to do that and support the program. If you want to be notified on August 16th of how to do that, just get on my newsletter at davidpakman.com. What if you could read 10 books in just one sitting? That's exactly what one of my favorite apps lets you do. It's called Blinkist. And what they do is take thousands of popular nonfiction books. They condense them down into text or audio that you can consume in 15 minutes. Blinkist makes sure that you're getting all of the important core insights from each book. So it's perfect for exploring a book you otherwise wouldn't have time for. If there's a full book you're thinking about buying, you can use Blinkist to get a sample first. Just think how much you can enrich yourself by being able to soak up an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way. And it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month, and you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video. All right, let's hear from some people in the audience because we're doing this a little bit early this week. I've got some travel coming up. We've got some great guest hosts. Instead of the show going dark, we will have Farron Cousins doing a little bit of guest hosting and Jesse Dollemore doing a little bit of guest hosting. It's going to be super strong, and I'm very much looking forward to it. But first, let's talk to some of you. We do this now via Discord. You can find our Discord at davidpakman.com/Discord. Let's go next to Andrew from New York. Andrew from New York.
Hey, David.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't on my end. Yeah, Andrew, what's going on? Now you do have me on some kind of speaker in the background, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. This is the best mic I've got, but I'll make it quick and easy.
Please.
What is your opinion on the new mask laws? Well, I have a better one. How about Cuba? What is your opinion on the embargo that's going on in Cuba? And Biden supporting the protesters. That's a better question.
I am against the embargo. I support the protesters.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. Very much appreciate that. Let's go next to Chris from Maine. Chris, you were on the air in Maine.
Hello, David. Can you hear me?
Just barely. It sounds like you're talking through some kind of metal sieve.
Okay, hang on. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Just barely. It's what kind of a device are you using? I have to ask.
Ready.
Wow. All right, I'm going to let you go. I appreciate the call very much. Let's go next to Sam from New York City on what is not an auspicious start here. Sam from New York City, you're on the air.
Yeah, can you hear me? I'll try to help turn things around.
Yeah, please. I can hear you fine.
All right, I'll try my best. One question that I've grappled with really since, I guess, Trump came down the escalator, or, that moment is, I know you don't identify as you're not a registered Democrat, correct?
That's right.
But you tend to align with the Democrat. I am a registered Democrat, but also, like you, have my issues with the party.
Sure.
But one thing I try to ask myself is, what would it take for me to vote for a Republican? When I consider how insane decision must be to vote for Donald Trump, I think I cannot imagine how anyone would logically come to that conclusion. One thing I try to ask myself is, all right, well, what would a Democrat do that would make me not support a Democrat? And is there a line you think, I'm not being super clear, but I guess, should we be more understanding of potential reasons diehard Republicans voted for Trump when as Democrats are incredibly unwilling to consider voting Republican?
Well, you've got to talk to the Democrats that you're referring to and see what their answer would be. Like, for me, it's really clear. If you give me a race where the Republican is the better option than the Democrat based on policy and based on all of the things that we look at, like, in other words, if in the last election, Joe Biden was the Republican and Trump was the Democrat, I would have voted for the Republican Joe Biden because I thought Joe Biden was the better option. What you're, I think, getting to is people who are blindly voting for party without really looking at the candidates, right?
Yeah, I guess it's also a moral question. Let's say the Republican and Democrat are both sort of generic, middle of the road Republicans, Democrats in terms of policy, but the Democrat is incredibly compromised for, some personal behavior or whatever else.
Sure. That's one consideration. The other consideration could be you might have a very centrist Democrat and a very centrist Republican, and they are very similar on policy. But you might say, well, overall, the platform of the Democratic Party is closer to my view than the platform of the Republican Party. So even though I'm kind of indifferent on these two candidates, I'll vote for the Democrat because their party has the platform I prefer. This is, unfortunately, this is way more thought than most people put into who they vote for.
I mean, I hate to say it, but it's sort of like, I believe that just take healthcare policy by the Democrats.
Yeah.
Saves many thousands or has the potential to save thousands of American lives. So
Sure.
even if some Democrat, this is obviously hypothetical, went out and killed someone, they killed one person, but I think electing them would pass healthcare policy that would save thousands of lives, then you can sort of make that calculation, that utilitarian calculation to
Sure.
justify it. And I don't know, it just
that makes sense. I mean, that's sort of like if you have two candidates, one of whom is a rapist, but would likely pass Medicare for all. Does it still make sense to vote for the rapist because it's going to be good for so many people? I mean, yeah, you start to get into those types of questions, and it's a very personal thing for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your thoughtfulness on this.
Appreciate the call. Thank you very much. Very important topic. Let's go next to Neri from Boston. Neri, you are on the air.
Hey, David. Jumped into you a few months ago, but I was curious on one of your, and this has been a couple weeks now, around Mike Pence. Do you think Trump could kind of save him from the grave he put him in and take him back as the VP? Like, hey, he betrayed us, but I talked to him. He's on our side now. He'll do what he'll do.
Absolutely. You can in politics, you can almost always rescue whoever, even though Mike Pence has been vilified. They were chanting "Hang Pence." He spoke at some conservative conference a couple weeks ago. The whole crowd booed him. I think that's what you're referring to. Trump has said things about Mike Pence let us down. If just hypothetically, if in 2024, Trump ran and he said, we are bringing back the best vice president this country has ever had. He did what he could with the election, but we just didn't have the rhinos with us. He could completely come up with some BS and say Pence is the greatest and rehabilitate his reputation overnight.
I was stuck between, like, should he try to grab Pence or be like, okay, Ron DeSantis, let's work together, even though I hate you. Because you're the second.
Yeah, I think that it's too early to tell. Trump could go either way. The thing about Trump is even if he assesses he has a better shot at winning with DeSantis, Trump wants to definitely be like the alpha as he sees it. And Mike Pence has much more sort of like stereotypical beta vibes than Ron DeSantis. I mean, this is like such stupid language. I don't even know that this really exists, but the way they see it, I think DeSantis is not as good of a beta to Trump's alpha as is Mike Pence. Now, there's nothing actually alpha about Trump, but I'm just saying as they see it.
Makes sense.
Yeah. All right, my friend. Thank you for the call.
No problem.
All right. There's Nary from Boston. Let's go next to, I don't know. I'm told that Tristan from Kansas City is back on. Tristan, I hope your mic's working.
Hello.
Hey, there you are.
Hi, David. So, as you know, I'm a recovering, not recover, but I used to be a conspiracy theorist back in like 2016. And of course, there's no shortage of conspiracy theorists now. In fact, it's probably worse than it's ever been. But there is some videos that I keep getting sent, and I'm wondering if you know anything about the Great Reset, because I would like a rational take on it, because I saw the video by the World Economic Forum, and it is very dystopian looking, to say the least.
So,
but do you know anything about that?
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. The Great Reset is the idea that on some kind of cyclical calendar, there are events that sort of like cull the weak and reduce the population and create kind of like the idea of resetting and restarting more strongly, and that there's going to have to be some bad things that happen. And so getting to that point, including death and destruction, but then you reset and then you build better in a way. Is that generally the Great Reset idea?
Yeah, and of course everybody's taken that because it is, it's a very challenging idea, and of course people are saying, "Oh, that's the new world order that they're talking about." And to quote one of the comments, what I see it as is psychotic billionaires telling everyone how bad billionaires are, and they're the ones who are going to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, here's the thing. Every once in a while, this is the problem with sophistry and pseudo-intellectualism, that every once in a while, some idea that people who don't read history or philosophy or political science or whatever, they have no frame of reference. So they hear like some hypothesis like this, and then all of a sudden they're like, wow, this is like some grand theory that explains everything. And they become very emotionally attached to it. Whereas like a lot of people who do more reading and studying would be like, no one thing is the full explanation to everything. You have to read a lot of different things, and there's aspects that make sense from each thing. This is kind of like the problem with pseudo and anti-intellectualism, that for people who have no frame of reference, they hear one type of idea one time and they become very attached to it right away. And then you can't even have normal conversations with them. So I don't know that I have that much more to say about it, other than I don't think any one idea explains the world in total. And we should be very skeptical of anybody who points to this is the explanation for why things are the way they are.
Of course. Yeah, I think epistemology is the right word for it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, understanding why we believe the things we believe. Yeah.
Of course. All right. Well, your comment section in this clip is probably going to be pretty toxic, just a fair warning, but thank you, David.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. There's Tristan from Kansas City, Missouri. We are taking calls a day early because I'm going to be traveling and a lot of different, things are going on and it's all crazy. Let's go next to Chris from Maine, who says that he has fixed his microphone as well.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Chris.
Okay. I have a question for you. What do you think will happen when Trump will not get reinstated in August, which it now is?
Yes.
What do you think the Mike Lindell and the Trumpists will do?
I think that a few of them will try to get some kind of violent thing going. They may succeed or they may not. Most of them will do nothing, and many will become fixated on some new date at which something is supposedly going to happen.
Okay, and one more question for you.
Yeah.
What do you think would happen if Trump ran in 2024 and then had Ron DeSantis as his running mate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would right now, I would say that gives him a better shot than running alongside Mike Pence. But as I mentioned to the caller earlier, I don't know that Trump's ego lets him have someone like DeSantis, who's much less of a second fiddle, the way Mike Pence was basically a plant. Sometimes it was almost like, is that a lemon tree or is that Mike Pence in the background there?
Yeah.
And Ron DeSantis isn't like that. And Trump needs a real a beta, to use their word, behind him. So that's what makes me doubt Trump would pick DeSantis as his running mate.
Okay, thank you.
I'm curious, how old a guy are you?
I am 15.
I thought so. Okay, that's it's great that you're following what's going on in the world. I think that's a really great thing, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. There's Chris from Maine, the most coherent caller of the day and only 15 years old, if you can believe it. Just so people know, everybody who's waiting to get on and all that shows up is like a nickname, you're not getting on. So if you want a chance at talking to me, it has to say name and town. Okay. So there's a lot of nicknames. There's zero chance you're getting on if that's what you have. Let's go next to Vihan from Orlando, Florida. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah. Can you hear me, David?
I can hear you fine, Vihan.
All right. So I was just wanting to ask a question about the infrastructure bill.
Please.
Because we have the bipartisan one that has 17 GOP senators and is very likely to pass. But I'm concerned about the reconciliation package. And Senator Manchin has said that there's no chance, there's no guarantee it's going to pass.
Right.
And Senator Sinema has said that she's not going to cancel her vacation plans to vote on this package, which I object to, but it is what it is. Do you think the reconciliation package has any realistic chance of passing into law?
I have no idea, and I see really no. I mean, we'll know soon. At this point, this type of prediction to me is not super interesting. Like, maybe, you know what, I don't really know. I think the more important thing on this issue is the entire framing of this infrastructure thing as, oh, how do we pay for it? Can we afford it? What really counts as infrastructure? If people, so there's progressives who want to do infrastructure for its economic stimulus and so on and so forth. Every right winger who is of the mindset of USA number one should be begging for this infrastructure package, because you look around the world and you look at American public transit, it's a joke. You look around the world and you look at our top airports, they're a joke. You look around the world at broadband access and then you see the United States. It's a joke. Forget, bridges and tunnels, of course. If you are an America first, America needs to be the best thing. How on earth do you justify not doing this infrastructure deal? It's the terms on which it's being discussed are crazy. Left and right should be completely united on this and getting this done. Could be for different reasons. Who cares? And the entire, I'm sick of the Joe Manchin and Sinema stuff. I'm sick of the Republicans who are just like, oh, we don't have money. We don't have money. Hold on a second. This is, first of all, we do have the money. Secondly, it's so economically stimulative to do this type of stuff. It's just crazy. So to answer your question, which I'm not really answering, I have no idea in hell whether the reconciliation version has a chance of passing. But these people better pass something because the country is desperately in need of it.
Yeah, that's totally correct, and we badly need that infrastructure package. Thank you for taking my call, David.
My pleasure. Really great hearing from you. I'm going to take some more calls, but in a moment. I'm going to take a very quick break. Just hold on, and then I'll be right back with everybody. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com and use the coupon code BETTER21 for a huge discount. Joinpakman.com. Let's go back to the phones, which are no longer phones. We are in the 21st century and we take our calls via Discord. You can find the Discord at davidpakman.com/Discord. Just a reminder, if you want to get on in the waiting lobby, it should have your name and where you were calling from. Very, very important. Let's go overseas and go to Diego from the United Kingdom. You are on the air. Diego?
Sorry, I thought I wouldn't have any problems with my mic, but I did. Hello, David. I just wanted to ask you about, in the theme of misinformation and conspiracies.
Yes.
A lot of people have talked about, for example, nationalizing, socializing Google as a way of protecting the public sphere. I know, for example, Andrew Yang talked about creating data dividend. What do you think about these kind of measures as a way of kind of combating misinformation?
Yeah.
Or do you have any different proposals that would be interesting?
You are not going to solve this issue by nationalizing a publicly traded company like Google. I mean, listen, if Google were on the verge of failing and the government bailed them out, they might have some leverage to ask for something. But this is where I feel like, guys, what are we talking about? Nationalizing Google. If we want to deal with disinformation, if we want to deal with, the online bullying and calls to violence and all that, we've got to have companies that have clear terms of service and they enforce them fairly and equally. We need proper, if you want to look at antitrust, okay, look at actually dealing with antitrust and enforce it fairly. You've got all these Republicans who haven't given two you-know-whats about antitrust and monopolies for 40 years, and now they only want to apply existing antitrust law to social media companies. Hey, listen, if you want to do that, I'm open to doing that, but you've got to enforce it seriously across industry in other places. And we've got to deal with education so that people are less susceptible to the disinformation and the nonsense to begin with. But this is where you're just not going to nationalize Google. It's just not going to happen. And so I worry that people get sucked down like, oh, that sounds appealing. It's just not happening. There's no legal basis for it. Yeah. There's no political will for it. It just, we've got so many other things we can do.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that, actually. Yeah. Could I ask you about your thoughts on wealth tax? I know I'm being a little bit cheeky asking you two questions.
No, I mean, listen, I think I think wealth tax is an interesting idea. The point of what's the problem with income taxes and capital gains taxes? The problem is that there's ways to avoid them and have significant growth of wealth without any of that growth being captured by the government. So the idea is you put in a wealth tax. I am really skeptical about how you enforce it. You could have situations where people, in order to make their wealth tax payments, actually have to sell assets and realize gains. Now, some might say that's the point, get them to realize the gains. I see it very logistically problematic, but I think the impetus for capturing wealth growth that really rich people keep outside of income, it's a smart idea. It's a sensible idea. I just don't know how you actually get it done.
Okay, that's very interesting. And finally, I just wanted to say that a long time ago, you talked to someone from Argentina about empanadas.
Yes.
And I just wanted to put the Chilean perspective and say that Chilean empanadas de pino are very good. I haven't tried the Argentinian, so I can't say they're better.
Right.
But they are very good.
Are Chilean empanadas typically baked or fried?
It depends. So the baked ones are the meat ones, and the fried ones would be cheese or seafood ones.
I just can't get behind a fried empanada. I have to tell you, that's one of the things that is typical of the Argentinian empanada. I want it oven baked. I don't want it deep fried. I want to taste the filling, not the oil it was fried in. You understand?
I can be in support of that. Yeah, the empanadas de pino are baked, so I'm sure you'd enjoy one if you tried one.
It sounds fantastic. I appreciate the call.
Thank you.
All right, there we go. There's Diego from the UK. Super strong phone call. Let's go next to Brandon from Colorado. Brandon, you were on the air.
Hi, David. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Great. So my mom is heavily invested into the anti-vax scene, and I'm sent a lot of videos all the time.
Yep.
And I've been watching them, and clearly there is an underground of anti-vax communities, and they do not agree on facts, and they're sort of trapped in their echo chamber. They think what they're doing is right, and so on. And I do not think that the COVID conferences, like we heard this week, are not really going to cut it for these people who are spreading this information. And so I'm thinking what I would be interested to see would be the people that they think are lying, so medical experts, doctors, whatever, personally confront them to show them the evidence and hopefully talk through with them to come to a realization of the truth, to actually get on the page with the facts. And I'm wondering, do you think this would even be possible, or people are considering this? Could this be a valid tactic to at least engage with this very serious part of anti-vaccine misinformation?
So, first of all, I mean, on a very practical level, there's not enough doctors and public health experts to do one-on-one confrontations with anti-vaxxers to convince them to change their mind. So on a practical level, I think it's very difficult. The other thing is, oftentimes when people are presented with facts and told what you believe is wrong, here are the facts, it doesn't convince them. It actually makes them further kind of plant their feet in the sand and not move from where they are. What we do know is that the people that are already in one's community, so if Dr. Fauci shows up at your mom's house, she'll probably be like, this guy's a liar. I'm not going to believe this guy. But if your mom's doctor, who presumably she trusts, says, you need to get the vaccine, it's really important, I've gotten it, my patients have gotten it, that does seem to have a real impact. So I think it's less about bringing in experts from outside people's lives to tell them you're wrong. It's more about creating conversations with the people already in your community. So for some people, it's their pastor, which is so disturbing. Why, when we see these pastors like Greg Locke, who we covered earlier this week, say do not get vaccinated to their churches, a lot of people, if their pastor said get vaccinated, they would do it. Same thing goes for local physicians and that type of thing. So I think that there's a lot to what you're saying in terms of people need to hear from their local doctor, whoever, people they trust, go and get vaccinated. If you sit Dr. Fauci in front of your mom, I don't think it convinces her.
Do you think that would be sort of the same case? Because what I'm saying is to confront the host of these shows on BitChute or whatever, who have had their shows for so long. Basically, it's sort of the same thought as
what did you say? Bitch? What? What was that?
BitChute.
BitChute. Okay.
Rumble. Those underground YouTube places. I mean, but I mean basically the same idea as what if we got the biggest flat earth personalities. And
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. So if there's some really big anti-vax person with a big audience and they get just schooled and made to look like idiots by, that could have an impact. That I don't deny that. That's an interesting idea.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for your call. Thank you.
All right. Brandon from Colorado. I will call you again soon. Let's go next. Where are we going next? It's just crazy what's happening. Let's go to Giovanni from Santa Clarita. Giovanni, you're on the air. Giovanni, you're on the air. Well, no Giovanni. That's too bad. Let's try Jamie. Jamie from I can't tell where. Jamie.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, David.
Hi.
I had a question about I was gonna say I started watching your videos like during the pandemic when I had online school and stuff.
Okay.
And you really helped me out.
Thank you.
But I had a question about like I know you're focused on like 2022, but like 2024 is kind of scaring me.
Yeah.
Like if I don't know, all the Republicans just kind of like seem like the same, like policy wise. So like I don't know.
Can you even tell? I mean, most of them don't even talk about policy. So I don't know how you can even tell.
Right. That's the part that really scares me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you have a question about that?
Oh, I had like what Republican do you think would like do like the least damage, like if they got voted in?
I mean, I think somebody like Mitt Romney, maybe, it's like some people are talking about Liz Cheney. I think Liz Cheney is actually more dangerous. She's more of a war hawk than Romney.
Right. She agrees with Trump
pretty
much all the time.
93% of the time, whereas Romney is more like in the 80s. I mean, I think the thing of, I'm sure there's other people who are moderate Republicans as well, but in terms of like prominent people, the thing about Romney is, I think that on social stuff, he's more or less indifferent from a policy standpoint. Right. I know as a Mormon, he probably has views I disagree with, but I don't think he would like prosecute too much social stuff. He might try on abortion, but I feel like almost that's pretty far gone. I think it would be tough to do that. He doesn't strike me as the guy who would try to start global conflicts, although I know there's examples of him saying hawkish things. And so basically it would be like, can we keep Romney in the middle rather than going to the right on, business regulation and taxation and stuff like that? Like, it's not, I'm not saying I'd go and vote for Romney, but if you said what prominent Republican would, if it has to be one, would I go with, it would be somebody like Romney, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering my question, David.
My pleasure. Thank you for the call. I appreciate that. Wow, what a polite caller. I love that. Okay. Let's talk to a couple of other people because it's really quite a special day. Let's go to Victor from California. Victor, you're on the air.
Hey, David, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I just wanted to kind of go over and ask what you thought about this idea of fake news. Do you think that and by the way, I'm a big fan of your show and other kind of commentary shows on YouTube. But do you think what we're doing or what kind of this move towards hard news, towards more commentating news is kind of creating more of this cloud of fake news in the world?
I don't think you said the move towards hard news and commentating news. Those are two different things.
Yes, right. So right now, when you look at the media, for example, if you go to Fox News or you go to CNN, a lot of it is kind of news interwoven with commentary.
Yes.
So they'll report on a fact, they'll report on an event that actually is happening. For example, if, like, say, a president is proposing some new legislation or he's signing into law something, they'll report that event and then they'll make some kind of commentary on it, right? And if I'm a viewer watching this, what I'm already doing is I'm already kind of looking at listening to what's happening and getting a kind of subjective experience.
Sure.
Right. So if I'm a conservative and I watch Fox News or CNN, for example, and there's some news that's being reported on, and then there's some kind of commentary that I don't agree with, I'll just automatically assume that it's fake news. And the same goes with like a liberal watching Fox News. And so do you think that moving towards the hard news to more kind of commentary and punditry, both from the left and right, kind of increases this world of not only echo chambers, but this idea of fake news?
So your question is kind of complicated, and I only sort of understand it. But let me tell you a couple different things. One, a lot of people, if it's packaged like a news show, they think it's just news, right? So you look at Fox in the morning and then you see Tucker Carlson at night, and it looks pretty damn similar. So you're like, this is all news, when it's really not. The other problem is there will be commentary even in shows that are supposed to be just news shows. That's another issue. And a lot of people aren't able to sort of suss that out. And then the same applies to online stuff. You look at websites for fake news sites and real news, and they look almost identical. People can't tell the difference. So I don't know that the problem is necessarily that you're seeing the mix of news and opinion, although you can argue that that is part of the problem because of how ignorant people are. But really the problem is the lack of media literacy and the lack of people who can think critically about what they're watching.
Yeah. Do you think, though, it's like they're just naive, or do you think that like if we define truth as something that could be possibly subjective, for example, if there's a law that comes into play that lowers taxes, for example, and I'm a conservative and I believe that lowering taxes helps stimulate the economy, or I'm a liberal that thinks that lowering taxes hurts infrastructure, for example. Do you think that if I'm watching like a news segment on CNN or Fox News, then I'm going to agree or disagree depending on my already preconceived notions of this?
Yeah, that's called confirmation bias, widely studied. That absolutely is the case, yeah.
And do you think that's kind of contributing to this idea of fake news? Or if it was just hard facts, if it was just hard news all the time, we would kind of just like absorb the news and make that opinion, in our day-to-day political lives. Whereas right now,
maybe. I mean, it's very theoretical, and it's just not the situation that we have. I do think the other problem is that fake news is so opinions disguised as news are different than fake news. Fake news is a very specific thing. It's now being applied too broadly. what you're saying is blurring the lines between opinion and news reporting, and that's different than fake news. But I think there's probably more to say. But I think, I've kind of given you my general sense of it.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right. There's Victor from California. Very much appreciate the call. Let's go to a break. I'm sorry I couldn't speak to more people today, but I will speak to more people very soon. That's for sure. If you value what we do at The David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind the scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial-free daily show, as well as special discounts on merch, including hats, hoodies, mugs, and t-shirts. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. All right, let's get into audience questions for the week. One day early because of my upcoming trip. Remember, we're going to have some great guest hosts upcoming, including Farron Cousins from Ring of Fire and Farron Balanced, the eponymously named Farron Balanced. Also, Jesse Dollemore. It's going to be great. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. But let's get right into your questions. David, do you think Joe Biden is really going to try to pass a national vaccine mandate? The statements so far from the White House have been confusing. Yeah, so the White House, I think, is being careful. There's been a couple of times now where White House staffers have been asked about, is Biden investigating? Is Biden planning for? Is he getting advice about a possible vaccine mandate? And the answer has been pretty carefully worded. That is not something he is looking to do or has any plans to do at this time. And of course, when I hear that, I don't hear he's eventually going to do it. I hear he's not ruling it out unconditionally because circumstances may change and it's conceivable that it makes sense to leave it on the table. But I actually don't think the Biden administration is going to even attempt to pass a federal vaccine mandate. However, we've already talked about the potential legality of state level vaccine mandates and municipality level vaccine mandates. And there does seem to be precedent for it. You look at Cambridge, Massachusetts in the very early 20th century. I don't remember if it was 1905, 1903. There was a point where the city of Cambridge said, you must be vaccinated against smallpox. The vaccine was, quote, experimental at the time, much the same way that now the vaccines have not yet received FDA approval, although they're expected to soon. And so my guess would be that if Joe Biden wanted to try to force people to be vaccinated, and again, that doesn't mean someone shows up and holds you down. My guess is that it would be some kind of requirement with, I don't know, maybe a fine attached to it or something. Even saying it doesn't really make any sense because I don't think it's going to happen. I think the way Biden would do it is he would push for governors or municipalities to mandate it, which seems much more based in precedent, at least from a legal standpoint. Now, I'll go even further. I don't know that we're really going to see that because I think accurately it's seen as likely political suicide for whoever tries to do it. I think even in blue states with Democratic governors, a vaccine mandate could be a recipe for you lose your next reelection, because I think it would not be well received by enough people in basically every state that it could be a really politically disastrous thing to do. And so more plausible and maybe equally effective is just look at the polling where people say what would be most likely to encourage them to get vaccinated. So as an example, last week I covered this live event where Joe Biden said, hey, governors, please use the money we sent you to give $100 to everybody who goes and gets a first shot. Okay. A poll was done on that over the weekend, and only 14% of Americans who are not interested in the vaccine said $100 would change their mind. 14% said, I don't want the vaccine, but for $100 I would go. Contrast that with 41% of those who don't currently want a vaccine who said if it was required to fly, I would go and get vaccinated. It doesn't take that much thinking to realize Joe Biden and the federal government through the FAA have a lot of say over what happens on airplanes. And would there be a more effective approach than mandating vaccines or giving people $100 than working through the FAA, either to directly or to encourage airlines to say, you must be vaccinated in order to fly with us. Or at minimum, if you're not vaccinated, you have to do a negative test. You could even, I think even that would significantly increase vaccination numbers. Right now, when you fly domestically, there might be some examples, like I know at one point Hawaii was doing something with testing. Right now, though, to fly domestically, you don't even need to be tested. So you could even stop short of a vaccine requirement for aviation, domestic aviation. You could just say, you now have two options when you fly. You either bring proof of vaccination, which I know some people will say, well, people will start faking those. That's got to be punished really seriously, really, really seriously, the way Canada punished a couple of Americans for faking vaccine information. You either give us proof of vaccination or you've got to get a test right here or within 48, 72, however you figure it out. That would make a really big dent in those who don't want to get vaccinated. Go by what people are telling you is the point that I'm trying to make. I don't expect Joe Biden to actually try a federal vaccine mandate. I think if he wants to go in that direction, it's likely he would say, governors, please do this in your states. Of course, if he did that, the governors that are willing to do it are probably the ones in the states that are already more vaccinated and less urgently would need to do it. That's sort of a moral hazard, status quo type of thing. But that's the way I see it. Let me know if you see the likelihood of a Biden vaccine mandate differently. David, even though Ron DeSantis has made Florida into COVID hell, could it somehow help him politically, including maybe when he runs or if he runs in 2024? Yeah, I talked about this a little bit on Monday. If you just think logically, you would look at what's happening in Florida, record cases, record hospitalization, relatively low vaccination rate. And Ron DeSantis going around saying we're banning mask mandates. We're not going to make kids in school wear masks, open everything, no limits on any. Okay. You would see that and you would say, this is going to backfire. This is going to be terrible for Ron DeSantis. I don't really know about that because if thinking ahead, if Ron DeSantis chooses to challenge Trump in 24 or Trump doesn't even run and Ron DeSantis does, you already know or can predict the way that Ron DeSantis's handling of COVID is going to be done in terms of a revisionist history. Ron DeSantis will say, I was the freedom person. We dealt with COVID, but we did it with freedom and we allowed people to decide for themselves what they want. No nanny state. And Republicans around him will probably cheer it on and say that's exactly what he did. So while you and I mean, it's sort of like the Trump COVID reaction. Now you listen to Trump's former press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, and other people that work for Trump. They talk about Trump's handling of COVID as if it was great. It was one of the worst in the world. And they've rewritten history to say it was great. It was absolutely fantastic. So while it should hurt Ron DeSantis, how disastrously he has made Florida into COVID hell central over the last month or two, it will almost certainly be reframed so that the right will only talk about the good things. We supported business and business owners by opening businesses and letting business owners and people decide what they feel safe doing. That's the way it should be. We don't want the government in your business. I know that you're saying, David, that's not, you sound insane when you say that. Yeah, I'm telling you what they will say, and it is insane. But if we've learned anything over the last few years, it's that these people will fall for insane narratives. These people will fall for absolutely false stories about what's going on in the world. So I wouldn't say Ron DeSantis destroying Florida is going to be helpful to him. But I do think that his destroying Florida can be rewritten into a story about freedom and being about letting business owners run businesses. That might end up making it sort of like a break even for Ron DeSantis if he were to run in 2024, or even in terms of just re-election for the Florida governorship. If you disagree with me, definitely let me know. David, I'm starting to see headlines that Joe Biden's approval rating is collapsing. Is this true? So first, let's answer the question about the approval rating. Then let's talk about what's actually going on. If you look at 538, Joe Biden's approval has only dropped like within the margin of error. When I looked most recently, Joe Biden's approval on an average of approval ratings went from 53 to 51.5. That's a really, really small change to say it's statistically significant yet. But let's imagine that it's true that Joe Biden's approval is declining a little bit. I think there's a couple things to think about. First of all, it might be more important to look at disapproval than approval. On disapproval, Joe Biden's disapproval has gone up from an average of 36 to an average of 43. My guess is that that's right wingers who have shifted from having no real opinion to saying they don't like what Joe Biden is doing, probably in part because of the propaganda, particularly around vaccines and COVID and masks, that has been spreading among right-wing media circles. But I think in this case, it's a little more important to zoom out. It's very common that a normal president, not Trump, a normal president comes in with a relatively high or higher approval rating. And then over time, their approval begins to erode and their disapproval starts to go up. Why is this? A lot of this disapproval stuff is based on, has the president done anything that you don't like? And even if you've liked a bunch of stuff Joe Biden has done, there will be some people where in February Biden does something they don't like. They now disapprove and they're not going back. And then in March, Joe Biden does something different that another little cohort doesn't like. And now they disapprove and they never go back. So the erosion of approval throughout a presidency is relatively common. With Donald Trump, he actually left office with the lowest approval of his presidency. I think it was 29%, according to, I think it was Gallup. So that's relatively atypical. Also atypical would be like, for example, George W. Bush after 9/11 had like 80 something percent approval. That was a unique sort of circumstance that explained that. So it's not particularly concerning. I think that this gets me back to Biden needs a major accomplishment this calendar year. Another major accomplishment. The vaccine rollout has been huge. Now the problem is too many people don't want the vaccine. Getting COVID stimulus done within a couple of months, that was huge. We're now in the second part of the year. We're in the third quarter. We're going to be in the fourth quarter before you know it. Biden has to get something else done. If it's the infrastructure deal, that could be useful. That could actually lead to a couple points of approval increasing. But I think that this is all pointing to a very interesting 2022 cycle. Also, in support of Democrats in 2022, it's also really important that Joe Biden gets something else done. And then we'll see what happens as far as the approval rating is concerned. But so far, everything is pretty typical. Slight erosion of approval, but it's time for Joe to get something else done. We've got a great bonus show for you today. Don't miss it. Sign up at joinpacman.com. We'll have Farron Cousins for a few days and also Jesse Dollemore for a few days, replacing me on upcoming shows. I will then be back. It's going to be incredible. Please be nice to them, guys. Please be nice to them. I would appreciate that. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. Blinkist is the app that helps you become a more well-rounded person by letting you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try it for free and get 25% off a subscription by going to Blinkist.com/David Pakman.